What's happening? Welcome to the latest episode of the Wildcast podcast. I'm Justin Spears. That is Michael Lev. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and comment the Wildcast podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and also check out not only coverage of the Arizona Wildcats football team, but we got the Big 12 Blitz series officially in full swing, taking a look at all the other Big 12 counterparts for the Arizona Wildcats. And we also have some other things too, some Olympic hangover stories, lots of other local stories happening. So go to Tucson.com for all your latest in Southern Arizona sports. Got high school football season right around the corner too. Got plenty to look forward to this fall, including Arizona football, like we mentioned. Lev, I think that Arizona football is perfectly ranked. I know we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of training camp and what we've seen and things that are of interest, and we'll also answer some of your Twitter mailbag questions as well. But Lev, you're an AP voter. You had the Wildcats, I believe, at number 21. And sure enough, Arizona checks in at number 21 in the AP top 25. It's the first time they are ranked entering a season since 2015, and the highest preseason ranking for them since 1999. So lots of cool things there. But Lev, your thoughts on Arizona falling number 21 in the AP top 25 and why you put the Wildcats there?
Yeah, I feel a little bit of regret in that I have fallen right in line with the consensus. I kind of wish I had stood out some one way or the other with my placement of the Wildcats. I find the first poll of the season to be far and away the most difficult one to do. There's so very little to base anything off of. There's so much change that happens from year to year in college football. And, the top 5 is not that hard, but the deeper you go, to me, like, the harder it is. And, I think sometimes when you see a team up close and personal, like we get to see Arizona, almost sometimes too much, and I think nationally it's like, oh, they've got all these star players like Noah Fafita and Tetsuo McMillan, Takario Davis, Jonah Sava-Inaya, and that's all true, but we get to see them warts and all. And they do have some concerns heading into the season. I'm sure we'll get to those here in a minute when we start talking about what we've observed during training camp. But I thought, kind of somewhere in that 15 to 25 range is where they would fall. You have to figure out where everybody else falls too. I have them in this clump of Big 12 teams, 4 in a row. In fact, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Arizona, and Kansas, which also kind of feels like something of a cop-out. Just like, just put them all together. What's also funny too, getting a little inside baseball here, is if you ask me to predict the order of the Big 12, it might not necessarily be the same order as what I would put for the AP top 25. It's because one of those, the top 25, is just kind of like roll the ball out. Who's got the best team? Who would win today if they all squared off in a tournament? Predicting the order of finishing the division, I would look at the entire schedule and figure out what their records are going to be, and then they're ranked by their records. So just because I have Arizona as the number, 4 team in the Big 12 doesn't necessarily mean it's going to turn out that way. And we're gonna see, I think, in this league and other leagues this year, a lot of ties at the top because everyone plays a different schedule in these giant-sized leagues, and you're going to end up with a lot of teams with the same records, and it's going to come down to tiebreakers and the like.
Arizona is the 4th highest ranked team in the Big 12 in the AP poll, behind the teams that Lev just mentioned: Utah, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State. They are one of 5 teams ranked. Kansas ranked just below them, I think at number 22. So 5 teams ranked in the Big 12. I think that's the most since 2017 for the conference. So the conference from top to bottom looking pretty stacked. But good news for Arizona, Lev. For right now, things could change throughout the season, right? Surprises do happen in college football. But the Wildcats only have 2 ranked opponents on their schedule, and it's in the first half of the season where teams are still trying to figure some things out. So potentially 2 of Arizona's toughest games, the Wildcats could figure out a way to win and really set themselves up nicely for that second half.
Yeah, that would be Utah and Kansas State. They play them in back-to-back games, third and fourth games of the season. Both of those games on the road, so very challenging after sort of the soft landing of facing New Mexico and NAU at home to open the season. The good news, I think, about that Kansas State game is that it is a non-conference game. So even if they lose, it doesn't hurt them in the standings.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, if in fact the Big 12 is a one-bid league, which is the most likely scenario, but maybe it won't be. I mean, it could be a two-bid league or maybe even a three-bid league, depending on how things go. But you want to get yourself into the conference championship game, and you want to win it, get an automatic berth into this new 12-team playoff. I mean, that's the path. So even if they lose that game against Kansas State, it won't hurt them in that quest.
All right, now let's answer some Twitter mailbag questions. A lot of submissions covering all the different angles that's going on at training camp. Let's first start off with kind of the most important one, or the one that everyone has been really curious about, is the status of Tetairoa McMillan. Kenny Summer just straight up asked, how is T-Mac? Well, T-Mac, as we all know, suffered a leg injury in the spring and April, kind of towards the end of spring ball, had a small procedure, got off his feet, and to start training camp, he's been slowly ramped up in terms of his production and his availability. When he first started at training camp, we didn't see him participate in 7-on-7s, run routes, team periods, nothing. He was just off to the side with strength and conditioning coach Colin Carroll. Those two have been inseparable. They've been working side by side this entire time. But then we've seen over the course of camp, slowly but surely, T-Mac starting to run a little bit more. We've seen him get installed into individual drills, and then he's running routes, and then he's doing 7-on-7s. Then we saw him in team periods. He's been limited. He's wearing the no contact red jersey over the last few practices, but the routes that he's running, some of the plays that he's been able to make, it looks like T-Mac has returned to his self, and I think his normal self. And I think that Arizona's being very smart about all this. And you already know what T-Mac is going to do when he steps out on the football field. But I think with what we've seen so far, Lev, very encouraging sign for him.
He looks great. And I bet you that if/when we ever get to talk to him this season, he will say that it actually helped him, to go through this, because he's been spending so much time like working on his footwork. You see him doing those kind of zigzag running over there on the side, stopping and starting. There's a lot of intent to it. And he's also, I'm sure, like in really good shape, because when you're in physical therapy or you're rehabbing, you're just working out all the time. And he's not taking as many reps as the other players, so he's not getting worn down either. I mean, he's going to be really fresh, I think, to start the season. It's just, and when he's in there, Justin, I mean, it's just a huge difference, right? Yeah. I mean, he gets so much attention from the defense. I think guys like Kean Burnett, who I'm sure we'll talk about more later in this podcast, could have, tremendous production, because those other guys are never going to get double teamed as long as Tetairoa McMillan is on the field. He's, his reputation precedes him, and his reputation is deserved. And I think he looks great. And I think the coaching staff has done a great job of, like you said, step by step. It's like he's just adding another layer each week, building up to the point where it sure looks like he's going to be ready for week 1.
All right, this one comes in from Richard RC. I'm going to kind of parlay a couple of them. They're pretty much asking this. This one also comes from Stewie 1227. Richard asks, what happened to Polito? Talk about Raymond Polito. And Stewie asks, how's the situation at left tackle looking? So Raymond Polito, who was a 4-star freshman last year, was 6'6", 330 pounds, just a physical specimen for a freshman. And he started at right guard and then got kicked out to left tackle in the Alamo Bowl with Jordan Morgan opting out to prepare for the NFL draft, which was expected. And Raymond Polito then took the starting reps in the spring, and we were all under the impression that Raymond Polito will be Arizona's starting left tackle. But according to Brent Brennan at the start of training camp, Raymond Polito will be unavailable this season. That does not mean that he is completely removed from the team. Last time I checked, he is still on the roster. So maybe there's an opportunity for Raymond Polito to come back next year and play for the Wildcats, but Arizona is not expecting him to be available. And so then it opens up the door at left tackle. And Rhino Tapatotai, the redshirt freshman who's originally from West Valley City, Utah, played high school ball in Los Angeles at Bishop Alemany in Mission Hills, California. He has not played a single snap of college football. So he's coming into this completely green, but he appears to be Arizona's best option at left tackle. Now, the thing that concerns me with Arizona on the offensive line, which isn't really the same thing with the defensive line. I feel like the defensive line, they have depth. They could have a lot of surprises coming up here. Whereas the offensive line, I feel like they have the pieces on the starting O-line. But after guys like Rhino, that's where I get a little bit concerned. So keeping Rhino healthy to me is a very important part, because you don't want to be in a situation where a true freshman like Matthew Lotto is getting game reps. The more that they can keep Rhino healthy, the better. I'm loving what I'm hearing from the players and the staff, what Rhino has been doing. He brings an energy to the Arizona offensive line that Jordan Morgan didn't do. While Jordan Morgan was a really good offensive lineman, one of the best that Arizona's had in quite some time, Rhino brings a certain swagger and an energy that I really like, but I'm going to have to see it on game day, because it's cool that he's doing it in practice, but we got to see it when it comes to games.
Yeah, Rhino is doing really well. He's a redshirt freshman, as you mentioned, has never played down of college football, and a lot is being asked of him. That's a super important position, left tackle, right up there with center. Probably the two most important positions on the offensive line. You want to keep your star quarterback Noah Fafita protected, and if that protection breaks down on a regular basis, as we saw for periods in the Alamo Bowl in which Jordan Morgan did not play, the offense can bog down, right, in a big way. Or even worse, Noah Fafita could get injured. So very important that Rhino stays healthy and that he continues to develop. I agree with you. I think my number one biggest concern of any aspect of the team is like, who are the backup tackles? Who is that third tackle? It looked like it was going to be Michael Wooten, the transfer from Oregon, but then he got hurt at one point during training camp, and he's out for the time being. Hopefully he'll be back soon. It didn't seem like it was a major thing. But besides that, you've got someone like Matthew Lotto, who's a true freshman, and it doesn't look like he's quite ready yet. It's a lot to ask of a true freshman to come in and play that position or any position on the offensive line. Jonah Sava-Inaya, he's a rarity, right? He was kind of a freak coming in under the radar, able to play right away and didn't look like a freshman out there. You wonder if the latest acquisition that the team has made, Joey Capra, a transfer from Nevada, who's got a lot of experience as an inside player, you wonder if that's going to prompt them to move someone from the inside to the outside to give them a little bit more, give them another option at the tackle position. I think Zarius Wells is a candidate to do that. And then, Alex Deuced, maybe someone who was touted as a tackle when he transferred in here from Northwestern, certainly has the size to play on the outside, but he's been working at guard. So a lot on the table, a lot on Josh Ogilvy's plate right now to figure that out. Best case scenario, of course, is that everyone on the starting offensive line stays healthy all season.
This one comes in from Matt Stoner, and Matt asks, who will be an unexpected breakout player this season? Lev, I have a couple guys in mind, but I'll let you start things out. I think we might be thinking about the same guy. We might be in the same lane.
Well, that's a good one. I wasn't thinking of that. You're thinking of Sterling Lane,
Yeah.
who is a defensive end in his third year, who's had a really good camp, and it looks like he's going to be a significant part of the rotation, which is a great development for him. I was thinking of two guys. One, Kean Burnett, third year tight end, absolutely just looks awesome in camp. Like it just seems like the light bulb has gone on for him. He's playing so much faster than he did. Feels like he's just at a point where he's able to utilize his God-given gifts, right? Which are he's got size, he's got great speed, he's got maneuverability that most tight ends don't have. Like when you watch him run routes or do one-on-ones, it just looks different than the other guys at that position. And the other one I would say is Jeremiah Patterson,
Yes.
the junior college transfer slot receiver, who he's like a Jacob Cowing clone. Like I don't know how they found this guy, but he looks just like Jacob Cowing out there. And Jacob Cowing was one of the most coveted players in the transfer portal when he came to Arizona a few years ago. Jeremiah Patterson completely under the radar, wasn't talked about that much, and he has looked like an absolute keeper, not only as a slot receiver and weapon for the offense, but as the punt returner as well.
Is it safe to say that he has been Arizona's second best receiver? Now, we haven't seen T-Mac really go out there and do his thing. We've seen flashes because he's limited, right? We already know that T-Mac's the best receiver on Arizona, could even be the best receiver in college football. Could Jeremiah Patterson be Arizona's second best receiver, despite Montana Lamonius Craig and Malachi Riley and a couple other promising prospects? I think so.
If you're just basing it on performance in training camp, then
Yeah.
yes. Jeremiah hasn't missed any time. He's made plays every single day. He's making plays down the field. He take a short pass and make defenders miss. I would give him that nod as the second best guy. And then once the season gets going, it'll be interesting to see if he is in that spot, because usually when you're the slot receiver, you're like the third guy, and they're going to play a lot of two tight end formations. In which case, usually it's two tight ends and two wide receivers. And we believe the top two, for the most part, is going to be T-Mac and Montana Lamonius Craig. But I don't know. Maybe Jeremiah will work his way in there because he's just that potent of a weapon.
And Jeremiah is very fast, can get out of his breaks. And the one thing that has really been so fascinating to watch is his ability to create separation, like getting out of his breaks. And he's doing it against Arizona starters. Like he's been matched up with some of the starting defensive backs that Arizona's going to use this year. And the fact that he's able to break down and get out of his break and get 3 to 4 yards of separation says a lot about his quickness and a lot about his, I guess, very technical route running abilities. He just seems very smooth. Like there's no growing pains. He doesn't look like a junior college player, is basically what I'm trying to say. He looks like a guy that has been playing Power 4 football for a long time.
Yeah, I don't want to pick on anyone, but there was this one-on-one rep against Javian Celestine, G7, and you have to respect Jeremiah Patterson's speed, and he looked like he was going to run a go route down the sideline, and he just jammed on the brakes, and it was a comeback route, and he gained probably 8 yards of separation.
Yeah,
from G7 with that route. I mean, like, I don't think anyone on the team could have covered him on that play. So the challenge now is let's see you do this in games.
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing to do it in practice. Now we're going to go into the real thing and see how you perform when the other team is hitting you. The pressure, the lights, some things that he hasn't necessarily experienced yet as a football player.
He did a stop and go. I forgot who was against, but the way the defensive back just collapsed to the ground. I think it was like Devin Dunn. Poor Devin Dunn. And Devin Dunn's a decent DB, but the move that Jeremiah Patterson put on was unreal.
Yeah. Also similar to the last couple of years, Gunnar Maldonado has been matched up against him a lot in one-on-ones. Yeah. And Gunnar was matched up against Jacob Cowing a lot. in one-on-ones, and that's like not a great matchup for Gunnar. Like that's not his game. Like
No.
covering the fastest player on the team and like limitless amounts of space around you. I mean, Gunnar's like, last year's most improved player. Very smart, very physical. But man, I don't know what they got against Gunnar. Maybe he wants that matchup. I don't know. But he's been that's been a tough battle for him to face that speedy slot receiver in one-on-ones.
I'm glad you bring up Gunnar Maldonado because on Tuesday's practice under the lights at Arizona Stadium, Gunnar had one of the more interesting second half of practices of practice that day. So there was a very intense short yardage goal line segment where it had 1v1s, 2v2s, the offense and defense going toe to toe. And the offense really just took it to the defense. I mean, they were scoring touchdowns, they were being aggressive, and then they started another team period. And Kedrick Riscano, the Ole Miss transfer running back, just completely trucked Gunnar Maldonado. Like I've never seen Gunnar just get ran over like that. But from that point forward, Gunnar Maldonado had like a TFL. He had an interception. It seemed like he was in on every single play. Like that pissed him off so much that he wasn't going to get embarrassed like that. And he has too much pride. And for that to be one of the leaders on your defense, I think says a lot about this defense, and it says a lot about Gunnar Maldonado. But with that being said, Lev, we bring up Kedrick and how powerful he looked. How is Brent Brennan going to manage that? That's the question that Roberto Gronkowski asked on Twitter. How is Brent Brennan going to manage Quali Conley, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Rayshon Speedy Luke, and Kedrick?
Do you think that's his real name?
Roberto Gronkowski?
Yeah. Probably not.
Probably not.
So
his Twitter handle is at Roberto Gronko.
Here's the thing: if you're a Kedrick Risano, right? Alonzo Carter has to convince him that he's going to get his turn and that it might not happen until next year. But if you look at the running back room, they're going to lose the top two guys, sure, right? Quali Conley and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt are going to be out of eligibility after this season. So wait for your chance, man. Like you're going to be like, you're going to be the veteran next year. And Kedrick's just a redshirt freshman. He's got a lot of college career ahead of him. Speedy Luke is another guy who would be back next year, but those would kind of be your top two going into 2025. And also, who knows what's going to happen, right? Like guys get injured all the time, especially at that running back position. Michael Wiley played only about half the season or so last year because of an injury, and that opened the door for Jonah Coleman to have a monster year. So, be ready, keep doing what you're doing. He looked really good the other day. And I think that's, probably the deepest position on the team. When someone as talented as Kedrick Risano is your fourth running back, you're in pretty good shape.
What's deeper, running back or tight ends? Because I've seen some good things out of this tight end group. Kean Burnett's in an elevated role. Roberto Miranda, who we've called Das Gronk because he's from Germany. He looks great. He bobbled a catch in traffic yesterday for a touchdown over Dalton Johnson. So he looks like a much improved pass catcher. And I really love what I see out of Dorian Thomas and Tyler Powell and some other guys there. I think Arizona legitimately has, and then Sam Olsen, the San Jose State transfer. Like we're talking about Arizona having 5 game-ready tight ends. Arizona, they got a lot of great running backs. What position group do you think is deeper?
I would give a slight edge to running back just because a couple of those guys have actually done it. They've proven it in games.
That's a good
Quali
point.
Conley was
That's a good point.
The main running back for San Jose State last year. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt had a huge season for New Mexico, rushing for over 1,000 yards, scoring 17 touchdowns. Whereas, aside from Sam Olsen, it's still a lot of projection at tight end. I mean, I think we're all in agreement that Kean Burnett is on the verge of having a breakout season, but until you've actually done it, it doesn't matter. I think Danny Gonzalez said this last night when we were talking to him. Danny Gonzalez, by the way, he's a great communicator, super fun to talk ball.
Yep.
He was the head coach at New Mexico, and he just loves talking about the game. He said that I think he said chance is like a dangerous word. Like you have a chance to be good. Like it's kind of the same thing as potential.
Potential.
Like sometimes you don't want to hear that about yourself because that means you haven't done it yet. So there's a lot of potential for that tight end room to be really good and really deep, but those guys also have to prove it on the field.
Speaking of Danny Gonzalez, a big job that's up in the air for Arizona is punter. And Marcus O'Sullivan asked, is there a serviceable punter for Arizona this year? I think so. They have a couple of options. I did not think that either of these names would be the starting punter. I thought Lachlan Bruce, the acquisition from Australia, who used to play at Oregon a couple of years ago, I thought bringing him in, they were pretty much like, hey, we need a punter. That's our guy. Let's go out and get an Aussie punter. Every team in college football has a punter from Australia. And so far, it looks like Michael Salgado Medina, the freshman from Mission Viejo, California, is going to be the starting punter. And on top of that, he's also going to be the holder, too, for Tyler Loop when he kicks field goals. So he's going to be the holder, going to be the punter. He is the new Kyle Ostendorp. Will he be as good as Kyle Ostendorp? I don't know. We'll find out. But, man, true freshman getting the nod by Danny Gonzalez says a lot about the guy.
Yeah, they must think a lot of him because not only, like you said, are they, is he the leader in the clubhouse for the punting job, but he's also apparently going to be the holder. And another thing that Danny Gonzalez said last night is that holder's like maybe the most underappreciated position in football. Like it's super important and no one ever notices you unless you screw up.
Yeah.
We were watching them. We got a really up close look at a drill that they were doing the other day. They put these 4 like orange circles down on the turf, like all together, so that there was just one little spot in the middle of these 4 circles. And it was the job of the holder to put the point of the football right in the middle of those circles. Like it had to be in that exact spot every single time. And that's what Michael Salgado Medina, freshman from Mission Viejo, California, was working on. As a punter, I'd say he's definitely been the most consistent from what we've seen. I think his operation is a little on the slow side for me. Like to me, that's the difference between him and his top competitor, who is Jordan Forbes, redshirt sophomore from Desert Ridge, Mesa. He gets the ball off a little bit faster, but if you do your job as in the protection area, that's not that big of a deal. And I think it's those two. And if Michael Salgado Medina does win that job, that kind of puts him on the Tyler Loop track. Tyler Loop spent his first year at Arizona as the punter before becoming a place kicker, and that became his full-time job from that point forward. I could definitely see that happening with Michael Salgado Medina.
Well, good news for Michael Salgado Medina, because if he's on the Tyler Loop path, then he's on his way to greatness. Because Tyler Loop already, I think, 12th all time in college football in field goal percentage, but he's extending his range a little bit. I mean, we saw him knock down a couple of 50-yarders last year. I think 52 is his career high. And Lev, I'm just saying, we've seen Tyler Loop knock down a couple of 50-yarders in practice, including a 57-yarder, and he's like making them with ease. Like we could be looking at Tyler Loop potentially getting closer to the 60s, when just a year ago we were questioning if he could make a field goal over 50 yards.
I don't think we were questioning it.
Oh, I was.
I think like
he hasn't done it. He didn't do it.
Yeah, the coaching staff wasn't sure he could do it. One of the media relations guys over there at the U of A, Brett Gleason, told me today that if Tyler Loop matches his point total from this past season of 110, he would tie the all-time scoring record at Arizona with 360 career points. So he has 250 for his career. He's made 49 of 57 field goals, 86%, which is really, really good. As you mentioned, the range is there. Like he kicked a 57-yarder the other day. That definitely would have been good from like 65.
Yeah.
Right. With ease. I think he's a weapon. And what I'll be interested to see is what is the decision-making process for Brent Brennan if they are in that part of the field? Like Jed Fish was very much, we're going for it on fourth down kind of a coach. More often than not, he would go for it. He would not kick the long field goal. Maybe Brent Brennan plays it differently. Maybe if the U of A defense is really good, you might be okay with a field goal in a situation like that. So we'll see if he gets more opportunities to kick those 50-plus yarders.
Before we get out of here, Lev, a lot of people are wondering, how's the defensive line looking? That seems to be the biggest question mark for Arizona going into this year because you're losing 9 scholarship defensive linemen. You got all sorts of new faces from the transfer portal. Some of these guys we haven't really seen a lot, but after hearing the coaches talk, after what I've seen in practice, I kind of feel like they're like, you know what? These transfers, we've seen them on film. We know what they can do. Let's see what some of these other younger guys, what they can provide. And then as we get closer to the season opener, maybe then we could start sprinkling in some of the transfer portal acquisitions and we could really form a 2 deep. Joe Ciamalo, the defensive line coach, wants a 3 deep. He's like, I want 12 guys playing on the defensive line, which I think is very wishful thinking with the current state of Arizona's defensive line. But I got to say, man, I like what I see. They're not as big as they were last year, but a lot of athleticism and a lot of guys who are kind of turning some heads. We mentioned one earlier in the podcast with Sterling Lane the second. I mean, I didn't really have any expectations for Sterling Lane after last season. As a matter of fact, I thought Sterling Lane would probably be like a transfer portal departure because of the coaching staff change, where he was on the depth chart. But now, man, this guy shot his way up to a guy who's going to be on the 2 deep potentially. So there's some promising pieces there. Like I said, the size is not there, but maybe they had something to do with the previous regime not being totally truthful with their weights on the roster.
Yeah, I wrote a piece about how the average size of the defensive tackles on the roster has gone down by about 20 pounds from a year ago. You know, does some of that have to do with, maybe them fudging their weights to some extent last year? Maybe. We have no way of knowing that. But, given the set of circumstances that they had, like when they could acquire players in the portal, like all the good 300-pounders are pretty much gone.
Yeah.
By that point, like you're talking mid to late January when everyone else had already gone shopping in early to mid-December, right? So it was hard to find those guys. They did the best they could in picking up some people. Chuba Ma'ai was someone who was already committed to Arizona before this coaching staff got here. He looks really good in the middle of that defense. Has dropped weight into around the 350 range, and he was up around 380, he said, right?
Yeah.
When he first got here.
Man.
Isaiah Johnson's another one who's gotten himself into really good shape, very explosive, 300-plus pounder. Like those two are set in the middle. Trey Smith, transfer from San Jose State, and Tai Yungalale, a returnee, are going to start at the defensive end positions in all likelihood. I think in the first 2 games, assuming that those games go the way that we expect them to, that is going to be like a tryout for a lot of guys. And you might see as many as 12 defensive linemen play in those first 2 games. Almost like I don't want to like put disrespect on New Mexico or NAU, but almost like the preseason in the NFL.
Sure.
In a way, right? This is a chance to throw guys out there under the lights and see how they perform. You can grade them in real games against real competition, and maybe you go from a rotation of 12 to maybe like 9 or 10, which is a little bit more manageable. Just ask Steve Kerr how hard it is to play 12 guys, right? Like it's difficult to do that. Obviously, it's a different sport, different set of circumstances, but you know what I mean.
Yep.
And I do think, like, who are you kicking out of the rotation? Like I think Chase Kennedy's going to play.
Yeah.
I think Keanu Mailoto is going to play. Kevon Darden, assuming he's healthy, he's going to play. Jara Anderson, if he's healthy, he's going to play.
Big Stanley from USC.
Stanley from USC, he's going to play. I think Lance Kennelly is going to play. Will they play beyond week 2 is the question.
Yeah.
Like I said, let's throw them all out there, get them all some snaps, some meaningful playing time, and see how they fare heading into that Kansas State game.
And I don't want to, get too far ahead because that Kansas State game is big time. But the athleticism, the lack of size, weight-wise, I'm curious how that's going to be in that Pac-12 opener against Utah, where the Utes traditionally got all 6'4", 6'5", 320-pounders all across the board. So when you're going up against the big guys at Utah, how is that going to work? To me, that's going to be a very, very important test for Arizona's defensive line.
Well, first of all, Justin, I think you just said Pac-12.
Oh, did I say Pac-12?
Yeah, which is.
Oh man, I said the ex-wife's name. Damn.
We all have to get it out of our systems. But Kansas State is they're very much like Utah. I mean, they have the same kind of playing style. They're going to be very physical. They're going to play downhill. They're going to have a running quarterback to boot. I think the best news is that they do have a bye week between those 2 games, which will give them an opportunity to rest up and heal up before the start of Big 12 play. Like, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they lost both of those games and they were 2-2 through 4 games. But assuming that they're competitive in both of those contests, that would not be at all reason for panic. When you scan the schedule, which is something that we like to do, and I'll be doing that in a piece for our special section.
Yes, sir.
Those are a couple spots where, they might be vulnerable. 2 road games, 2 very physical teams, both of those coming early in the season.
Another question we had in our mailbag before we go.
Someone
asked, what is the toughest non-former Pac-12 road game this season? So, exclude Utah in this. Out of all the schools that are coming from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, what is the hardest road game for the Wildcats this year?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
Space game?
Space game.
My guy.
So for those who don't know, UCF every year, they host a game that they call the Space Game, and they make a huge deal out of it. Big space program there. It used to be called something other than UCF, but a lot of astronauts went to school there, and it's an integral part of their community and their culture. And they host a space game every season. They wear cool uniforms, and they usually kick the ass of whoever comes into town. They absolutely crushed Oklahoma State last year, 45-3. That certainly feels like a potential trap game for Arizona, flying all the way across the country to play at UCF in a game that they usually win. So that would be my vote.
So UCF is 7-0 all time in its space game, and they have outscored their opponents 349-147.
Okay.
For those doing the math, that's an average margin of victory of 28.9 points.
There it is.
That's according to Daytona Beach News Journal. So, yeah, the Knights don't mess around when it comes to the space game.
Yeah, and those uniforms they had last year. Yeah, those uniforms they had last year were sweet, and they are in the game too. If you are playing against or with UCF, you can don their space alternate unis.
I love that. All right. Well, we got plenty to look forward to over the next couple of weeks leading up to the season opener between Arizona and New Mexico. For all of our coverage on the Wildcats, go to Tucson.com and download the free Wildcaster mobile app. Some of the stories, you have to have a Tucson.com sub, but a lot of cool stuff on the app. Check us out there. Download it off the App Store and Google Play. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and comment the Wildcast podcast wherever you get your podcasts. For Lev, I'm Justin Spears. We appreciate you guys for listening and watching.